Hi everyone, and we're here in a very volatile time today, and we're looking at the conflict involving Iran, the United States, and Israel. It's quickly escalated beyond a series of military strikes into a regional crisis with global consequences, and retaliatory attacks on military assets, shipping routes, infrastructure are raising concerns far beyond the Middle East. And for security leaders, this moment underscores the critical role of global security operations centers, or of course GSOCs. And they're now expected to track geopolitical volatility in real time, translate intelligence into operational guidance, and help organizations protect people, facilities, and supply chains before disruption hits. So joining me today to unpack all of this and what security leaders need to be watching is Stefano Ritondale. He's the Chief Intelligence Officer at Artorias, a provider of threat and geopolitical intelligence solutions to companies and governments globally. So Stefano, welcome to SecurityDNA today.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a true honor. I really appreciate it.
Stefan, we're dealing in a situation now that is almost man-made more than it is regionally made. The role of a GSOC has changed drastically, especially since the days you were handling things like that. Should the GSOCs that were a part of enterprise businesses, global businesses that were staking interests in the Middle East have seen this escalation coming? And were there any clear warning indicators besides just listening to the threats that Trump was making during the 2 weeks that led up to this?
I really do believe there was. And honestly, you can see the indicators all the way back, even in January. And I think this is kind of goes to the issue when we're talking about GSOCs and kind of the security teams. A lot of times they focus much more on the immediate requirements and what's like the 50-yard target. And they kind of lose sight of the long range, long-term intelligence analysis and predictive analysis. And the first indications that I would say in January, I actually remember texting somebody. And I told them in January, one of the key things that really was a red flag for us, that we kind of just sent warnings because our AI system picked it up, sent us the alert, gave us everything, and from an AI and open source intelligence. What we realized was Iran made, during the protests, the weekend of January 10th, basically, Iran made two decisions in the same day that were very critical, which was a huge red flag to quell the protests. One, they instituted an internet blackout. Basically, all internet is cut off. And then two, they deployed the IRGC ground forces as well to the cities to quell the protests. And we even had reports also that they even deployed the regular military. That was a huge red flag for us. That to us meant, okay, the fact that they did it the same day, when generally when they do this, it's kind of spread out because these are different measures they take to stop the protest. The fact they did it the same day indicated that the Islamic Republic was panicked about these. They were genuinely concerned. And what happened is we saw when the reports that tens of thousands of protesters were killed.
Right.
And then we saw Trump's threats in response to that, and then all these buildups. And this was the largest military buildup in the Middle East since 2003, the invasion of Iraq. And so there were a lot of back and forth, but I think the first real indicator that something significantly concerning was going to happen was then in January, and then how Trump really deployed all the military assets and all the decisions and all the reporting we're getting clearly indicated that the fact that the United States was seriously considering regime change, and that was openly declared prior to this happening, and if you're going to do a regime change operation, these are the military assets you would want in place, all indicated that if that happened, the Middle East was going to go up in flames. We were going to see exactly what we're seeing now. And I think a lot of businesses and Fortune 500s, even, some that we've kind of had conversations with, it's kind of like, this is to be expected. This is going to be what was happening. And unfortunately, that's kind of what we're seeing now in the Middle East. But it's crazy how the first indicator for us was Iran internal decision-making process, that how that crossed over Trump's red line, and then the subsequent decision from there. So you can look at it almost a month plus of leeway and warning that something significant was going to happen in the region.
And I think it's interesting because we're talking about how GSOC managers would have interpreted this. And, my personal opinion is our own government didn't interpret the signs correctly because if you're looking at regime change and you think you're going to take out a hardline government and replace it, and they still have their entire military intact, you're sending mixed signals to everybody. So, also, what are some of the key geopolitical and proxy signals that many of the GSOCs that around the area there missed during this lead up to this war?
I think one of the key aspects was this belief that if there was a type of operation that was going to go on, it was going to be, we were going to look at a situation similar to Midnight Hammer. In other words, even if the United States took more extensive military actions, this construct of Iranian retaliation would have been fit within the mold of Midnight Hammer, where they kind of launch an attack against Qatar, against IUD, and then everything ends, shut, okay, we're good to go. That's it. And I think people never seriously considered the risk assessment. And at the end of the day, as GSOCs, what you should really be doing in an intelligence department, you need to be analyzing all the different courses of actions that can really impact your businesses. And I think everybody tried to focus, and it was this because there was perception bias, and the fact that that's only what we saw in the region was this tit for tat, and then it's over, right? We've seen it before, even before Midnight Hammer, between Israel and Iran, just bilaterally. Right. It's always this, tit for tat that doesn't have broader implications in the region. And I think everybody just assumed that's what's going to happen, and they never took the consideration is, if Trump goes for regime change, and the fact that the first day they killed the supreme leader, the most likely way Iran was going to retaliate was that all bets are off. Sure. We're going to drag the region to a war. We want international airlines to stop flying the Middle East. We want to target these countries' oil facilities. We're going to at least try or threaten to close the Straits of Hormuz. They want, their way of responding to that is just absolute chaos. And I think that's where a lot of people were caught off guard. And even to some extent, I think some organizations just got, from a lot of these events, kind of got lucky. They rolled the dice, and some of them maybe before everything happened managed to pull their people out or events ended. And others, they were still acting like, they'll just launch some ballistic missiles and we'll go there and consider it. Yeah.
Well, Stefano, that's the other issue. When you have your GSOC, the mission is to make sure that you're, staying ahead of some of these geopolitical alerts, and that you're going to enact the proper protocols and mitigations before things escalate. As you're assessing the signals in the background. Unfortunately, this war was launched at 2 a.m. in the morning on social media. How much warning were enterprise businesses, global businesses in the Mideast, given by this administration that this was coming down the chute? It looks like not much at all, and they were left to their own devices, which we saw the aftermath. In the week after, we had hundreds and hundreds of people trying to get the heck out of there.
I think there's two case examples, right? When we're talking, because we're talking about the Middle East, right? But even the week prior to that, for example, we saw what happened in Mexico, which is also something important. Right. And what I would say is the Mexico case, clearly, I think GSOCs are very reactionary. They're not proactive. I think that's a fundamental problem. Okay. Obviously, in Mexico, nobody suspects. Mexico, I cover Mexican cartels extensively. That's one of my things that I focus a lot on. Obviously, the killing of El Mencho, the leader of CJG, caught everybody by surprise, right? That you're reacting. Because once they kill it, you're trying to assess the situation. Okay, measures in place. How do we adjust? Because to your point, there's no real warning. That just happened out of the blue, and CJG just went nuts in Mexico for a 24-hour period. I think that's a clear example. There was no warning, and there's never going to be a warning. We're never going to know when something like that, for example, happens. But I fundamentally, I think in Iran, there was a significant amount of warning. And I can tell you right now, our AI systems, we have a decision-making system called Nemesis, was sending warnings and saying, hey, military operations in the Middle East are very likely. Based on Trump's stated goal that regime change is a distinct and very likely possibility, Iran is going to conduct significant retaliation operations across. And I think it just goes back to, my counter to that, Steve, from this conversation is, there was the largest buildup of U.S. military forces since 2003. What other warning do you need? I mean, obviously, we have to rely on open source intelligence. We have to rely on publicly available intelligence. Maybe you have some contacts on the ground and you have some humans. It's always very difficult, right? And a lot of this is obviously more on the government side, the classified side, and they're always going to keep their cards close hold. But the fact that there was such a significant deployment of U.S. military forces there, for some reason, it just didn't register of saying a regional war is the likely course of action. And I think people were trying to either operate under past assumptions and use that too much, rather than saying we might actually be maybe in a black swan event where, because there's a different decision that's going to be executed, and Trump is kind of relayed, he doesn't want to repeat the same issue over and over and over again. We have, there has to be more. And I think what I would say is we can't act surprised with this administration because President Trump assassinated General Soleimani. That was a significant decision. The problem was, how did Iran retaliate? Which is, let's just bomb all Assad air base in Iraq. So it fed into this complacency of thinking that's how Iran was going to respond. And to be honest, I don't even think the U.S. military and the government, they knew, because if you look at their target packages since this happened, they knew Iran was going to do a full-blown retaliation because that's what they've been striking. Right. I just think that the private industry never took that into serious consideration.
Well, and again, too, I think it's because of this sort of stop and start philosophy that this administration has, when it comes to geopolitical dealings around the world. I mean, one week we're invading Greenland, the next we're, going across the border in Mexico. But in your mind, what did the GSOCs correctly anticipate about the Iran retaliation strategy? And then on the flip side, what do you think was the biggest analytical and operational mistakes they made during the run-up to the conflict?
Right. So I think where we kind of saw a lot of agreements is that once the crisis was clear what was going on and how Iran was retaliating and how this wasn't, that's when we saw all the plans in effect, right? And you can kind of see this from businesses kind of making decisions. We saw, for example, major companies, Qatar Airways, Emirates, Maersk, kind of a lot of these immediately taking actions to address this problem set, a lot of them closing airspace, right? So clearly they do show they had plans in place. Maybe they're covered up in dust and they hadn't executed in a while, but there were plans in place that they executed it all there. But again, I think what the problem with you're saying, Steve, is it was reactionary. And in some of these cases, there are opportunities to be proactive. And I think the reason why they're not being proactive is that we're starting to see a slow change, probably more in the Fortune 500, Fortune 100, companies. And some of these larger corporations, their GSOCs are starting to reincorporate geopolitical risk threat assessments into their overall plans and GSOCs. But I think that's very few and far between because the vast majority of businesses don't have that. Their GSOCs are much more focused on physical security in the immediate vicinity and area. At best, travel risk, but at a very ad hoc reactionary, and cyber. So they weren't able to be proactive, and I think we need to get to a position where a lot of these aspects, just as we try to be proactive, let's say in cybersecurity, we have plans in place, we have training in place, we have implementations, people track, we try to adjust. You always see your systems updating, hey, there's a new cyber threat, so we have to update our computer systems to make sure we're not vulnerable to it. We're not doing that in the physical geopolitical aspect. It's still very reactionary, and I think that's the fundamental difference that we have to change.
All right, so to your point here, what is your group's process when you're talking to clients globally for verifying intelligence before issuing alerts to clients? And at the same time, how big a threat is disinformation to GSOC decision making during conflicts like this?
Right. So how we operate is, so it's not only do we give an alert because the reason why, because we're all intelligence professionals. So, the alert is nice, but how we would say is like, okay, well, what's the so what? Why does this matter to me? Right. And so that's why we also, and this is all all AI generated. We obviously have a human component. My Intel analyst can talk to their GSOCs. We have that crosstalk and communication. But when we send the alert, there's this analysis. And the analysis matters to the organization that uses us, right? It is a tailored analysis to their requirements. It could be security, logistics, you name it, health, doesn't matter. But you get the alert, and then you get the analysis, and the analysis' job is to say, this is why it matters to you. And right? And if it triggers a decision, our system, knowing, having that cooperation with their GSOCs, like you can give us your security plans. Then our AI can then, if that alert and analysis triggers a decision point for the business, now the AI says, here's courses of actions, 1, 2, 3, as many as you want, based on your security plan. Here's all the steps, the decisions that you can make, and each one gives you the steps. So if you're like a low-level GSOC analyst, you could just read the system. It says step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and it lays it all out, and then you just make a decision and you have to execute it. That's how we want to do it, because at the end of the day, alerting is like, hey, your house is on fire.
Right.
Thanks. Like, what's the so what? How do I adjust it? What are the decisions I need to make? That's where I think that's kind of the future we also need to go into. And our industry is very stuck on the alerting and this idea that as long as what you do alerting is what matters. And I think you're bringing up a good point. Is there's misinformation, but there's also another problem that I think it is this because I've dealt with this before with Artorias in my previous position with the government, was a lot of these systems, they don't care about circular reporting. And what I mean by that is, let's say Iran launches a ballistic missile at Dubai, right? How a lot of these businesses and the alerting works is if 5 or 10 different sources report on this ballistic missile launch, you can literally get 5 to 10 alerts. And so what you're trying to figure out if you get that is like, wait, is this the same event? Or is this 5 or 10 different events? Which one is it? Because that matters in many constructs, right? And that's another thing that they don't do that we try to really strive to prevent is like, no, if you're getting alert, this is it. This is the alert with all the available information. If there's an update, it will update and send you an updated alert with the context that this is an update. And the misinformation piece, it really goes back to if you're doing OSINT, you just need to have experts in this. Like, for example, myself, I said I do cartels. I know where the guys talk on messaging groups. I know where they talk on social media. I know where they post a lot of information. I know where to collect that type of information. All my analysts really have specialties and focus because they've done either one way or another OSINT collect or PAI observations on different regions, so they know. And more importantly, when the AI analyzes it, we tell the AI, hey, be advised. For example, Russia, Ukraine. This source of information is coming from a pro-Russian, government or mail blogger. So when you analyze it under that construct, and you can even still make it tailored to your requirements. And there's other ways that you need to be, with the misinformation piece, because it goes back to the geopolitical. Because what I think people focus on is the alerting and the being reactive.
Right.
And so you might get a situation where here's a misinformation report. Is it true or not? And you're trying to spend time trying to figure that out, rather than analyzing from a construct. If you're being proactive and you're tracking all these misinformation accounts, let's say they're Iranian misinformation accounts, but all the Iranian misinformation accounts are reporting one aspect. Okay, do you want to completely dismiss that? Or do you want to analyze it from an information warfare to see if there's indicators and warnings for something you need to look into, right? So let's say before this crisis happened, I see 10 Iranian state media and misinformation accounts post direct threats saying we bombed Kuwait. We can verify it's wrong, but there is very valuable information to try to figure out, wait, why are they all singling out, let's say, Kuwait? Why are they all saying we attacked Kuwait? What's the messaging? And is there indicators and warnings that I could be there? And that's where with the misinformation, you also want to analyze this and see if there's trends. Because trends can give you indicators and warnings, and indicators and warnings can give you decisions. And I think the industry is, again, very 50-yard, 25-yard focus. What's my immediate future, and how can I impact that immediately? And this is where you need that much more in-depth analysis. You do have to check for misinformation. There's ways you can do that. You have, we have our own. What we do is every source of information, we put a trusted source index, and we rate it accordingly. And then the AI, what it does for us, it constantly learns from it. So if they have 10 accounts that are all reporting the truth and one is saying something completely off, the AI knows, it updates its trusted source index and its scoring and adjudicates it accordingly to make sure that only accounts that give you information is legit. But you still want that information. And I think this is where we need to completely transform how we do analysis and be much more long to medium term than just this immediate short-term analysis.
Which really brings to the point, Stefano, is that OSINT and AI are really changing the role how GSOCs are working globally, especially when we're talking about geopolitical threats. Can machine learning actually detect escalation signals faster than human analysis? And are there other online indicators that provide valuable information when you're monitoring state actors like Iran?
So I could give you a perfect example where our AI picked up, for example, this was before the war, where a Bahraini-based group in Iran, one of the Shia militia groups for Iran, one of their
Right.
proxies, issued a direct threat against Bahrain. And our AI system picked it up, analyzed it, and sent the alert with the analysis and the so what to everybody way before anybody else. And I think, unfortunately, we don't have a choice. We have to leverage these large language models, AI, to do this collection and analysis because there's just too much information, right? And we have our own scraper, right? Because a lot of the problem you're running into in this industry as well is because what you're bringing up is the collection,
Right.
right? And a lot of times a lot of companies, what happens in GSOCs, they rely on third party to kind of send them information. But even a lot of these are much more what I would consider loosely, even for each nation, like your mainstream media sources or your national news organization. Where they fail significantly, even these third parties where they push information to you, is the Facebooks, the social media, even the messaging channels, right? Because people talk on WhatsApp a lot. People talk on Telegram a lot. And if you don't have an ability to capture that and analyze it, you're missing out on very critical information. And I think that's where for us it's very important we had our own scraper because then we can do that wide net collection. And as you're saying, it's a huge wide net. There's only so much a human eye can track at all times. There's only so many screens you can have up on tracking all these different things. It's too much information, and large language models are that key component that can collect everything and then give you just a tailored report and analysis for you. And frankly, the longer we've seen OSINT has really grown in the last 20 years, and the reason why it's grown in the last 20 years is because the access to the internet has exploded. Because before then, it wasn't really an intelligence. There was no real such thing as OSINT outside of just newspaper clips and what you see on TV. With social media, it has become a predominant form of intelligence, and for corporations, it's the only form of intelligence that we have outside of some human capabilities that you might have on the ground. But the more people get connected to the internet, the more you have to collect and the more you have to analyze, and inherently you're going to have to rely on large language models to help you do that analysis. But it's very important that you get a group of people who understand how to tailor the LLMs to your requirements, and that's where we focus on. We do that specifically of making sure that the LLM analyzes everything from an intelligence community standard, and then based on your requirements as a business, we can then substitute, let's say, how the government would analyze it, and then we would focus that on your own requirements, whatever it may be. But I think LLMs and AI are the future.
And obviously most people share your opinion here. And I'm wondering though, did many of the security teams of these Fortune 500 global companies, and also the White House and the Pentagon, did they underestimate the risk of kinetic and physical attacks by Iran and its proxies as a result of our attack? And why do you think that's so? And how do we deal with that?
I would say from my perspective, I think from a government, I mean, I can say, look, we were talking this before. My previous job with the government, I was very much involved with the Iranian ballistic missile program in the sense of tracking it for the government. I was an opposing force analyst. So the Iranian ballistic missiles, let's say during a war game or military exercise, I would build them and kind of act as. I'm not surprised by this. And to be honest, looking at the strike packages and everything the U.S. military has done, I think the U.S. military knew this was the thing, and that's why they kind of operated in this area. But it goes to your point. I think a lot of other people, maybe even within the government and in businesses, were caught off guard. And I think this kind of goes back to something I wrote in your for you guys, is that this is where you need geopolitical experts by region, right? I said at the beginning of this recording, the first real red flag we got was when Iran announced internet blackouts and the deployment of IRGC ground force was a significant red flag. And we know this because a lot of us focused on Iran for so many years that we can kind of pick that up and say, okay, this is a significant development because we had that expertise. I have guys who are very specialists and focused on China. So when Xi Jinping did his purges, they were the ones who could put it in a very specific meaning. No, this is why it matters in this grand scheme of thing. Okay, is there now problem sets, maybe not immediately, but medium to long term, we need to look at in China's perspective, because these purges are taking a whole different direction. And I think that's where the other aspect of GSOCs need to happen. You have the AI component, your own scraper, ideally, your own collection, but that's the human element, right? The expertise in that. And those experts can then tell the AI also, hey, this is why it matters, because you want to update the knowledge bank of the AI as well. And if there's a new development, you can update that, but that only can come with a human component. And I think a lot of times you're going to see businesses think, if there's a problem with the AI, let me throw more money at the AI and more money at the engineers. And it's like, it's not the engineer's job to, basically dictate to the AI how it should do, let's say, an HR's job, or how it should do an Intel's job. That's not their responsibility.
Yeah, I'm curious though, when we're talking about cause and effect here, and the AI taking a little larger role in situational awareness and being a little more proactive in a GSOC setting, should every intelligence alert that comes across our desk include an operational guidance essentially saying, do this now?
If the alert is significant enough that requires that decision, yes. But this is how the military operates.
Right.
Right? It's here's my PIRs, my priority intelligence requirements. And then all your PIRs are tied to decision points. That's literally how you do it. And that's how we tell people, like, hey, by the way, this is how you should operate. Like, this is when we advise them on our LMs, and even when they have their security plans and we onboard them, we tailor all their requirements, either from a security, logistic, or whatever. So the AI analyzes that. And then we help them. They tell us what they're looking for. We have that onboarding. We have that crosstalk. But then we build out basically ways where you want to make sure everything that is collecting on and everything that's analyzing has decision points associated to it. It's very important to note. A lot of the decision points where the Nemesis, we call it, when a Nemesis alert is sent out where that requires a decision, is not necessarily, oh, Iran is bombing this country. There are a lot of things that can trigger a Nemesis alert that is very obscure and that you would not know. I'll give in broad sense an example. There was a specific alert that was sent out because our system picked up that a major event and our event that we were kind of responsible for, another major event was announced the same day. And this was months in the future. This was months, from when it was first announced. But they both happened on the same day. So what the Nemesis said was, hey, there's going to be a strain on security because of this. You need to start planning on ways that you can mitigate this threat based on everything you're telling us. And not only just from a security perspective, it also highlighted the logistical requirements necessary to adjust from that. But a GSOC wouldn't know that. A GSOC is not going to see, let's be absolutely real. This is why I think AI is very important, because it can contextualize everything based on your requirements. It was simple as we had our event, and then another event was announced the same day, right? And if and this is happening, by the way, while Iran is at war. So obviously all the GSOCs are focusing on Iran. They're going to miss that. And that's where I think, again, AI can really collect things that you don't know what you're looking for. It's the very famous, Donald Rumsfeld quote, right. The known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. Well, that's why the AI exists. If you give AI all your parameters, and then you have your own scrapers like us, that we do, and then you just send it out, the system is just going to collect. And it's going to understand, hey, this is a decision because something just announced and it could cause a problem. Now, just because a Nemesis alert sends out, say, hey, here's possible courses of action, you as our client, you don't have to make those decisions. You can just take that into consideration, and then you execute your own plans or everything, ideally, with us and all that. But it's good to have it on your radar, especially now we're in these moments, and I think unfortunately GSOCs are going to have to get used to what we're seeing geopolitically in all these crises. I think this is unfortunately the new normal.
Right.
Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, the Middle East, Iran, right? We're talking about possibly in the future, China, Taiwan. North Korea, South Korea always has things, right? We saw the events in Mexico. We're seeing events in South America with, rise of counter cartels, events in Cuba. This is the new normal. And we haven't even touched upon all the problem sets that are plaguing Africa right now. And there's going to be a lot of crises popping off around the world. And it is very difficult for just a couple of GSOC analysts to collect and analyze and make decisions all by themselves. They need these additional tools, and these are the tools to make them successful.
So why don't we close it out with this question? What do you think the biggest operational lesson GSOCs should take away from what's going on in the Middle East right now, and apply that to, like you said, some of the boiling issues across the globe right now?
Yeah, I think the main issue is take more seriously. Don't be hesitant to analyze and make serious recommendations and course of actions based on the most dangerous course of action. Right? Like, don't fall within this premise of, oh, because something always happened like this is how it's always going to be like. And I think if that's one thing we need to learn from Iran and the United States right now is that look for black swan events, analyze black swan, build plans, and then more importantly, as a GSOC, it is very important that you are integrated in the planning process with other departments involved in how your business operates. Is that your operations department? Is that your logistical department? Is that your PR department? You never know what department might matter. Be involved with them, look for their input, because your job as a GSOC is to analyze the threat and then provide, hey, this is why it matters. But the decision and how to execute and mitigate and adjust that generally would, a lot of that might fall within other departments. So include them in your planning processes, and then make sure your SOPs are up to date, and just make sure you're analyzing those black swan events. I cannot reinforce it enough. And don't be afraid to raise red flags to the leadership. I think this conflict, at least for the next couple of years, most corporations are going to be like, okay, if we're getting red flags, let's see what we could do beforehand. So if crisis happens, we're in a better position to respond to it.
Excellent answer, and just fascinating. I mean, this is a scenario going on right now that 2 months ago, might have sounded more like a spy novel than it did a real life occurrence. But I think, like you said, this is the new normal for us. Stefano, I want to thank you for joining us today, Stefano Ritondale. And everybody that's listening to us on SecurityDNA, we encourage you to look at our library of past broadcasts on YouTube as well. And this is Steve Lasky, the Editorial Director for Endeavor Business Media's Security Group, signing off, and we'll see you on the next broadcast. Thanks, Stefano.
Thank you.